Joining me is the co-host of CFL Talk, David Morisuti, and our very special guest, Rod Smith, the play-by-play announcer of the 2024 111th Grey Cup, which we all attended, and we're amazed by the event, period. Rod, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Frank, David, it was good to see you in Vancouver and good to have this opportunity to chat with you on your show. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to be at a live broadcast. So the first thing I'd like to ask you, what got into you to go, other than the voice? I'm sure you were told a million times when you were younger, you should be on radio. But what in yourself directed you towards this career that you found yourself in?
Well, it wasn't a linear path right into it. I mean, I had to fail along the way in order to finally realize maybe this would be my best shot at a career. I studied sciences at Queen's. I was good at science and math in high school, and I pursued that, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I just figured that's the natural course because broadcasting just didn't seem like an option. Even though, as I look back at it, my friends, when we played football in high school, we used to like to imitate play-by-play commentators. We were stats nerds about the CFL especially, but about other sports as well, NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball. So I always loved sports. I was always right into it, and I was always into doing imitations in high school, and I loved the public speaking aspect of it and everything else, but I just wasn't smart enough to put 2 + 2 together that maybe that's the road I should go down. And it wasn't until largely because I just wasn't doing very well at Queen's. I loved playing football there, but I wasn't, it's a very tough program, and I didn't really see where it was going to lead me for what my passion was. And it was my dad, my dearly departed father, who back then said to me, why don't you consider broadcasting? You seem to be all around it and enjoy every aspect of it. And I was floored. I didn't think that that's something he would approve of at the time as a career. And I was wrong, and I transferred to Ryerson, which is TMU at the time, and then at that point I was in my early 20s, and it was a difficult road, but I finally felt like I was on the path that I wanted to be on, and it took a lot of hard work and a lot of breaks along the way, but it's been a really fun ride, and it's now going on upwards of 40 years.
Not just because you played football, and so the one aspect that we talk about with athletes and sports in general, as you know, as anyone who even scratches the surface of sports, there's the odds of actually making it, for example, as a player in the NHL, Major League Baseball, and all the other sports. The odds are very slim that you'll get there. Rod, in your instance as well, because from where I sit watching a lot of young people that want to be in broadcasting, it's a very blessed situation that you find yourself in. Do you tap the table a little bit once in a while and go, I'm really lucky where I got. I don't know how lucky, you realize how lucky you are.
Yeah, just about every day. Honestly, yeah. I mean, I don't. It did take some breaks. It did. Now, and that's not to be too self-deprecating. I think I developed some skills along the way, and that definitely helped me. But you do need to get some breaks along the way. Now, that said, you got to help create them. You can't sit still. You got to keep going after things and failing. And eventually, you meet some people along the way, and there's an opportunity that suddenly shows up, and you can do it. And you've been working at, along this line to take advantage of those chances. And all those cliches you hear about in career building, everything else, they're cliches because they are true. I guess the thing is that they don't always tell you is sometimes there are a whole lot of bumps on the road along the way. A whole lot of times that you think that you're ready and you're not, or it just doesn't happen that way. And it gets frustrating, and some people give up on it. But I mean, I do feel largely lucky though, because I look back at my path, and especially, of course, at TSN, I'm so grateful for the chance that they gave me. I mean, first put me on the air actually. So no, I thank my lucky stars. It's been, as I said, it's been a lot of fun. But there were some things that happened along the way that really helped move me along.
Let me be clear. That question was only asked because I wanted to say that it's a lot of hard work, and you have to make a commitment to
you do
what you want to do. And the commitment, I was at a juncture at a point in time in my life where I could have gone to Edmonton to continue with my media career, but then I chose the marriage I had and the children I was going to have.
Right.
So it's the point I guess I'm trying to make is if you want it, you got to be 100% in, or you're not going to make it. And
Yeah,
that's
and by
what
the by the way, those sorry to interrupt you, Frank, but those considerations for family, that's never a bad decision. And
yeah.
I've made those choices along the way too, where I could have been doing play by play much earlier in my career, but it would have been a life on the road. And I don't know you know I don't know if some of my kids would have been born. I mean, it was different. I have no regrets that way, but I mean, you do have to make those choices, and to me, it's never wrong if you're making a decision for family.
David, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm sure. Yeah, and I remember when you came to talk to us in our class, Rod, years ago at Centennial, with through I think was it Malcolm Kelly that had you guys come in. I think it was you and Kate Burness that had come in
Yeah,
to speak with us.
yeah,
When
that
you
was that would have been wow, that would have been at least 10 years ago, wouldn't it, David?
2017, I
Oh,
think
was it that? Okay, okay. So
about 7 years
7 years
ago,
ago.
I'd say.
Yeah. Mhm.
You've obviously talked to a lot of students. You've talked to a lot of broadcast, aspiring broadcasters and things. We've seen the industry kind of change a little bit with new medias being brought in. Traditional medias have had to adjust and adapt. But when you talk to some of these younger students about your journey and some of the things you learned, what are the things that you've noticed that maybe younger broadcasters can kind of take from your journey?
Well, I mean, and some of them, again, David, are kind of cliche, and I'm sure I would have said it that day too. That I found what was important is, first of all, you have to love it, because if you love it, you won't mind staying up till 2 in the morning to work a little harder at it. It's not something you even have to tell yourself, because it's just something you naturally want to do. If you have that, if you know, not everybody chooses a career that's their hobby as well, but it doesn't hurt if you have such a passion for it that you'd naturally be up doing it anyway, even if you're not getting paid a nickel for it. So that part of it, and I think being realistic with yourself about your abilities, about what it is you want to do, and what the marketplace is like out there for something that you want to do. I think you have to be honest with yourself. So, some people aren't necessarily cut out for that aspect of it, or they might have their strength might be more writing and research, as opposed to say being on the air, or broadcasting, voice work, things like that. Or some might be great announcers, but they may not have a great knowledge base, and they may not be able to come up with ideas on their own, that sort of thing. So there are so many different aspects of this business, which is ever changing, as you talked about. I mean, you two, case in point. I mean, the new media. I mean, a new way of delivering entertainment, information, compared to the traditional models of radio and TV. It's changing a lot, but there's still opportunities out there. And I do think you have to go with what you like and what you think, that if you're not already good at it, that you can get good at it. Be honest with yourself, and then work like crazy at it. Keep pursuing it. There was a voice coach that I had once. I didn't have many voice coaches. In fact, this is more in recent years. A lady by the name of Maurice Tobias in LA. I was trying to get in with a New York agency. It's since that I did a little bit of stuff there, but then moved on. But she said something to me that always stuck with me. And even though I think deep down I've always known it, and you two probably do as well, but I just love the way she put it. And when it talks about someone, some about abilities, natural ability compared to hard work, her line was, "I will never underestimate the power of desire." And I think that's a wonderful message. That
That
you might look at someone and think, you know what, I don't know if they have it. I don't know if they could be good enough, but they just keep coming back. They keep working at it. They want it so badly. And lo and behold, eventually you see them and you might think, wow, they've really improved, or what happened here? They've changed. But it's the desire that fuels people. If you have that kind of fuel, I think you can go a long way.
that another thing that you could say, and people say, well, they were an overnight success, right? To be that success, there's so, like the duck's feet underwater, there's so much it takes to
Yeah.
get there. So if you're a person, I guess my last comment on this is, if you think you want to do, let's say what Rod's doing, or something like being on TSN or any other TV station, or a movie star, actor, comedian, all that stuff, you have to really be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
You really have to be willing to do the work, because it's not a hard thing to want to do. And that was my point about how many people want to be broadcasters like you are, Rod. It's about how much you want to do it. And I wanted to congratulate you as well, because when you did join TSN, you also, it almost like they invented an award for you for broadcasting when you won the Gemini. What did that feel like? Because there wasn't really a long history for that Gemini when you won it.
Well, there was they had just become Canadian Screen Awards, and I thank you for that, Frank. There was one for that I shared with James Duthie for Sports Center for hosting, and another one for then the first one was for play-by-play of aquatics
Exactly.
at the Olympics in 2012 in London, which was that was very surprising, to be honest with you. I was very proud of that. I was proud because I worked so hard at the assignment, but I certainly wasn't a natural in terms of my knowledge about aquatics. About it was swimming and diving and synchronized swimming. And I was told a year out before that I would be doing it, and I did spend a lot of time researching. But it was a lot of work, including once the games went on, just because the schedule was very tight and there wasn't a tremendous opportunity over a 2 week span to get much sleep. But it was really gratifying. I mean, it was nice getting that award. If I was going to get an award for anything, I'm glad actually it was that, just because I tried so hard. And you try, so it's almost like fear of failure that keeps you motivated as well. You worry about, am I going to know the exact storyline or every single name of every swimmer that I have to know? That's remains very special to me. I was really deeply honored by it.
I spent a lifetime doing play-by-play. I did CIS football as well, but
Mhm.
I did everything everywhere. So I'd be 1 minute I'd be doing the CIS, another minute I'd be, doing college. And what you said, you just reminded me of, you had a new lineup every time, and it was amazing. I think part of the reason why I loved doing it so much was the challenge. The
Yeah.
challenge, that's when you realize, and for anybody out there that has any aspiration to do anything, grab the challenge with both hands, because
Yeah.
if you do that, the reward is immense. David, I wanted also to talk about the 2010 Olympics, but if you want to interject anything, please feel free at this point.
No, 20.
And
I mean, I always the Olympics are always an interesting one, because like you're totally switching gears, right? You're in a totally different sphere of things. I mean, 2010 must have been something totally crazy, considering home, so a lot more Canadian eyes on it, right?
Yeah.
The international, but Canadian wise, there's so many eyes on it. What was the sport you did in 2010? What was kind of your
It was long track speed skating. I worked with the amazing Katrina LeMaydon,
oh
two-time
my,
Olympic gold medalist, and also just she was an experienced broadcaster by then, working with Steve Armitage at CBC. So she was the Olympic veteran, and I was the rookie coming in, and very nervous, very intimidated about that assignment as well, because as you mentioned, CTV had gotten the rights, the CTV consortium, to do the games after years of CBC. There was a lot of pressure on us, and we had some. There were very good Canadians in long track, including the first gold medal, Christine Nesbitt, the first gold medal, not the first one for Canada on Canadian soil. She ended up being the second. There was a freestyle skiing gold medal, I think, a day or so before, but that was this great facility in Richmond. And yeah, I remember being been in the business a long time, but I felt like a rookie again. And the one thing I will say this though, and it being in Canada was special. Doing Olympics in Canada was special. But the one thing I gravitated to, and anyone who likes sports and following sports can relate to this, no matter what the sport is there's always a story. There's always and if you can relate to your viewers, you don't have to have, if you have an analyst beside you who can provide all the technical expertise, you need to guide it along and make everything that's happening relatable to the person who's watching it on TV. It's got to work for them. You got to be able to tell them a story. So you don't have to be, you have to know the sport. You have to be able to talk about the sport, but you have to be able to relate it to people, human interests, any other aspect of it. And find the story, tell the story, get people interested in the story of each and every race. And that was, to me, that was the challenge that I concentrated on, instead of trying to go deep into the X's and O's and just the technical side of any of these sports that I was not an expert at. And I truly think you don't have to be. If you have an expert analyst with you, they're the ones that can, help supplement that aspect of it. But we're all humans. That they're competing. There are a lot of emotions in play, and I thought that challenge was one that I took very seriously, is trying to bring the emotion out of every race that I was involved in covering.
And that was also the Olympics where Canada decided as a country politically to try to own the podium, if I remember
Yes,
correctly.
yes,
So that must have been very inspiring for the broadcast team, because here you are, you're doing this for the first time, and you know you're going to probably get a little more success than the Canadian team is accustomed to. So
Mhm,
now you've got a bright light shining on
mhm.
you, the network, and how did that affect you in your mind, knowing that this was going to be a special Olympics? Everybody knew it was going to be,
Yeah,
just by virtue of how hard the country worked at bringing these athletes to the precipice.
yeah. Nerves, not nerves in a bad way, nerves in a good way. And I mean, seriously, that the kind you'd feel even as a fan watching, if you're cheering for Canada, watching at home, and you get this, you get this great seat, the best seat in the house, in order to watch it and to talk about it, and feeling the magnitude of it all, especially in Olympics in Canada, absolutely. So, but the nervous energy is a good positive energy to draw off of. Not only just, I hope I don't, blow the call or get it wrong, but also just, you also feel like you're up there representing anyone who's watching it, and helping tell the story that's unfolding before your eyes. And that part is what I mean. I'm, born and raised a football guy, but I was able to take what I really learned to love about just being a football fan and watching games and talking about games, and was able to put that onto any sport that I was assigned to cover, because I could still, you're still talking about people who train a good chunk of their lives as hard as they can to achieve a goal, and you're a part of, even just in watching it, you're a part of telling their story, and that's very compelling to me, and that helped me get into it very quickly, and really enjoyed some of the storylines along the way.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, you don't realize the magnitude of these Olympic athletes, as you said, train their whole lives,
Yeah.
train for, you get one shot at this, and then they get, and some of them, they don't get another opportunity in 4 years, right? That could be it for them.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with those moments, though, like, everyone talks about like a call from a certain Olympics, whether it's, Bilodeau in 2010 when he got the
Mhm.
first, I think, the first medal, right, and things like that. Like, when you're in those moments, how much are you preparing for what you're going to say in those moments for those calls?
It's a great question, and there really, two thoughts on that. One is, you do prepare something in your mind, or you, at least maybe not script it, but you think about it. You think about how you could take something that you may only have 5 seconds or less,
Mhm.
so you want it to be succinct. You don't want to. You don't want to. You don't want to say too much, squeeze too much in. Sometimes you may be limited to only a few words, so you do want to think of something punchy. That said, it doesn't always happen that way, and sometimes things just come out. I mean, and they would for anyone that you're watching, and something unexpected or amazing is happening, and you just say it. It has to be brief. That's the only thing I'd say. But I've had a couple along the way where I hadn't planned it, and other times, as I say, I thought about what would be so significant about this storyline at the end if it played out this way. So you do run it over in your mind, but never a completely scripted. I mean, and for one obvious reason is you don't know how much time you're going to have, and you certainly don't want anything like that to sound scripted. You want it to sound natural and emotional. You want it to be natural,
And
and
fresh. And
yeah,
fresh.
exactly. But that said, you do think of, like, maybe ideas and words and play around in your head. And even as it's playing out, you may think in advance, even only say a minute in advance, the way something's happening. And
Mhm.
so you do have to be prepared, but you also have to be somewhat spontaneous too. And that's a tricky marriage, because you don't want to sound like you were thinking about it and had it all worked out the night before.
Yeah, it brings me to thinking, do you believe in miracles?
Yeah, which
One phrase.
Yeah, and Al Michaels, 1980, and I don't think I think that's a classic example, because I think I heard him interviewed about it, and I don't think he had that planned. I mean, that they went into that. That was the mighty Soviet Union in hockey at a time when they just didn't lose against a bunch of Americans, very few of whom went on to any kind of success in the pros in the NHL. It was just, kind of some misfits coached by Herb Brooks, and no one saw this coming. I don't think anyone would have seen it coming that day. So he might have started thinking about it, in the minute or two before, and the word miracle might have come up maybe a little earlier in the broadcast, but it's a legendary call that really made Al Michaels. I think maybe more than any other call that he had. And you're right. I mean, I think a lot of that was just spontaneous, and what a lot of people, certainly in the U.S. anyway, watching this thing, were thinking at the time.
It's also timing.
Mhm.
Like exactly when that was said. A breath here or there, and it changes that emotion.
Yeah.
It's all because that's the thing. I think I remember when I was doing high school basketball before the NBA came to Toronto, and the energy in the little gym, but it was packed, and how my excitement in my voice was elevated by the
Mhm.
energy around me. How good does that feel? Because this is going to be kind of a transition to why you're here, the
Yeah.
Canadian Football League. As a former football player, and the energy from the crowd, how does that affect your broadcasting?
Well, the energy of the crowd, I mean, that's a two-edged sword because I remember hearing about this years ago. I think it was kind of trying to remember who the play-by-play guy was that was talking about it.
Buster Hewitt.
Yeah,
Buster,
was it Foster Hewitt or Danny Gallivan? I'm trying to think that you'd be branded as a homer for
because
shouting
you're
more
yes, that was
when you
Foster
get
Hewitt. I
when you're
assure you.
shouting over a home crowd. The assumption is, and in this day of social media, it doesn't take much. You get some online hate from people who it sounded like to them like you were cheering against their team because you were raising your voice and your energy level. Because you're getting fighting with the excitement of the crowd, and so it sounds like you're more partisan to that side. But to answer your question, though, it's exhilarating not because of who wins. I mean, and I'm sure you felt the same way. I don't really care. I like it when it's close. I like it sometimes when there are aspects that are unexpected, and that's nothing against the team that ultimately loses. It's just you like a good story. You like drama, and I'm more drawn to that than regardless of who wins or loses. I mean that shouldn't matter to you, and it certainly has not mattered to me. And even though some might accuse you of being partisan for one side or the other, but I do like that aspect of it, and that is just strictly, that's the fan in all of
There it
us.
is.
You know, you want to. I mean, as I say, not a fan of either team, but just a fan of watching something an amazing sports story unfold. I mean, it kind of brings out the kid in a lot of us, and I like that. That gives you goosebumps regardless of what happens.
When you what made you decide or the opportunity to move into the CFL for yourself? Because you were doing highlights for the longest time. Then you went to the studio and you were hosting the studio panel. What made you think that play by play was the way you wanted to go for
Um,
yourself?
I I I don't know the specific moment, but I knew I wanted to work in football. And when I started at TSN, they had got the Canadian University package.
Hmm.
Starting with the Vanier Cup in 1989, I was actually at CBC Radio at the time, but doing some freelance work back at TSN where I'd started in 1987. I was doing stats at a college game for Michael Landsberg and Peter Watts, and I just do. I didn't know if I was paid for it. I didn't care. I just wanted to go down and just get closer to an actual broadcast. And from there, I always wanted to be involved in football coverage. So CBC Radio, Vanier Cup '89, the first one at Skydome, and TSN's first. That was Michael Landsberg calling that with Jamie Bone. And then the next year, Michael did three. And then when he left, Gord Miller became play-by-play along with Jamie. It was a former star quarterback at Western. And then I got to do sidelines. So that was my first in a football broadcast with TSN and what was then the CIAU. U Sports was called CIAU then.
Hmm.
And to work Vanier Cups, which I'd gotten one game away twice in 1979 and 81 from playing in one. I lost out in national semifinals, but the event itself meant a lot to me. I really appreciated the history of the Vanier Cup. I thought this was so cool to be involved, just even involved in the broadcast. So then 3 years of doing that, and then Gord moved on to do hockey, and they were looking for another play-by-play guy. And yeah, threw my hat in the ring right away. This was like a dream. Even more at the time, even though I grew up loving the CFL as well, but just because I'd had a taste of Canadian university football as a player, to be able to call a Vanier Cup was just outstanding for me. I really appreciated the opportunity. So somewhere along the way, once I was getting in the business, I did have that dream of being a play-by-play guy in football, and that was the first big break. And then I got to do some CFL games later in the '90s, and I had a long break from it. Frank talked about making decisions for family as well. The opportunity I had was to be you're either a play-by-play guy or you're a host. You can't
Mhm.
sort of be both, and I kind of wanted to be both at the time. So it made more sense to me, just to be closer to home. And so I gave up a lot of the play-by-play stuff for football, just where we were ramping it up. And of course, we had Chris Cuthbert by then and Rod Black, and so there were very few opportunities for me. And I was out of our CFL coverage for years until Dave Randorf left in 2014. And there was a chance to at least get involved again, and I was studio host for a while before getting a chance to do play-by-play again.
That I know was a lot of fun. So here we are, a football player, um, a football broadcaster, and now you're doing the biggest football game, and nobody doubts this, and that we all know that it is one of the greatest moments on television, calling the game that everybody waits for every year, that David and I sit there and say, when's the season going to start, that we work towards, and that is the Grey
Mhm.
Cup, one
Yeah.
of the greatest events in Canadian sport, in the panorama of sports in Canada. It is the biggest thing. People can poo-poo the CFL, but they can't the Grey Cup, can they?
Yeah. Still gives me chills. Just I used to get them just as a fan growing up in Ottawa, in the late '60s and into the '70s. Gave me chills then, just as a nervous fan, and then um, getting more and more involved in the game in television, and then ultimately with the chance to call it. You're right. It's always been special to me, and it always will be. And certainly to have that chance. I mean, I've gotten to call four of them now, and they're all special. And you're right. There's no other for me and what I've loved growing up, and there's no other day like it in sports.
Frank and Rod, I give you credit because when we were talking in Vancouver leading into the Grey Cup, the big thing was the Argos don't have Chad Kelly. They're the underdogs. Winnipeg's been there many times before. But Rod, you were adamant to not count out the Argos. As you were watching that game, as that game was going along, when did you feel like the Argos were going to be putting themselves in the driver's seat in that game?
Well, I honestly thought, David, that it was going to be like the regular season games and that it would be in doubt for either team right until the end and maybe a field goal. I really expected it to be a final possession game. And I look back at it now, and I did wonder. There were 2 points actually that I thought that could go injury wise could go against either team, and one of them did. But the first one, when thinking if it's a close game, and you're talking about a field goal at the end, then you know the kicking game is important. And the Argos had a great one with their kicker Liram Hiralau, but he got hurt after his second field goal. And I remember wondering at the time, this game, I'm sure, stays close, but what's going to happen if they need a 45 plus field goal at the end to win the game, and he's got an injured right knee? That's a big factor. It turns out not long after that, he kicked one from over 45, and he seemed just fine. So they passed that test. But then when it wasn't until late third quarter that Zach Collaros got that cut on his throwing hand, his index finger, and we knew right away how big a factor that could be, especially when he put a glove on.
Yeah.
And he wasn't used to wearing a glove. And it was puzzling how he was throwing deep balls almost right away. I mean, the first pass he threw was deep, and I would have thought they'd try to establish a short passing game or Brady Oliveira more. So that part, it wasn't until later though, David. It wasn't until I'd say late third, fourth quarter where you could see what was happening, that the Argos probably knew they had him, when their all-star quarterback or their future Hall of Fame quarterback Zach Collaros was not going to be 100%. But in talking to you guys before that game, my logic was this: in Game 1 back in Week 8 in Toronto, it went to overtime. Winnipeg could have won that game, but the Argos ended up winning it by 2. in overtime. Chad Kelly didn't play in that game. Kelly did play in Week 19, I guess it was, in Winnipeg, and he played. He played reasonably well, but it wasn't a game for offense. It was a game for defense, and the Argos defense made some big plays at the end to stop Collaros, and they ended up winning that one by 3. A low-scoring, close game. So to me, even without Kelly, I thought if Nick Arbuckle doesn't hand it to him, if he doesn't go crazy and start throwing picks, if he so-called game management, which he for the most part did, he didn't make a lot of mistakes. I thought they had a very good chance because of their defense, and that in the end, it played out that way. Not the way I thought it would. I didn't see them running away in the fourth quarter, but I do think the Collaros injury was the biggest part of that.
It's funny. We talk about it all the time, and one of the things that for the last couple of years, I think a point that can't be lost is the necessity of having a quarterback room with guys that can start. And I think the CFL has changed. Some of the teams have changed their mindset where they're not even using their backup quarterbacks to run the ball on short yardage. I think they've come to the realization, and I think this is why I think the Argos won. The Argos won because when the season started, they have a head coach who believes and works towards having 3 guys in that room that all can start any game that he needs them to start. What we saw was Winnipeg didn't have a third guy that they thought they could truck out there in the Grey Cup, in my opinion.
Well, Terry Wilson he's a rookie, and he hardly got any reps at all in the season. The plan was Chris Streveler, and Streveler midway through the season got hurt. And after that, it was pretty clear, and that's not a knock on Terry Wilson. It would be the same for any rookie quarterback. But the Bombers were going to go as far as Collaros could lead them. And, and that right up until the end. And I still don't know if they win that game if Collaros stays healthy. I think it would have been close right until the end. I think we would have had that close finish that I was talking about before. But you're right. I mean, I think even the Argos were in better shape, even with Arbuckle starting. Had he got hurt, they still would have had Cameron Dukes, who had a lot more reps than Terry Wilson. I mean, and he played most of the first half of the season. And I know in the end that Dinwiddie, preferred the veteran savvy of Arbuckle, and that's why he went to him. But still, you're right. I mean, having the experience, it's interesting because I don't know if you guys can remember in previous years, there was an understandable hue and cry about all the injured quarterbacks, all the star quarterbacks. What's the league going to do? All these top quarterbacks are going down. The only silver lining to that, dark cloud was you got a lot of new guys that are getting some reps in. You're getting some experience, and some of them end up being starters in the league. And I agree. I think we kind of hit a point where teams were getting richer in quarterbacks with some experience, and that helped pay off for them. So, but you're right. In Winnipeg's case, though, that was the exception because Chris Streveler had already been hurt.
Yeah, didn't have another option, and that's too bad. And I agree with you 100% that even if Collaros hadn't gotten hurt, the Argos had a great chance to win that game anyway. David,
and I know we buried the league kind of here, like the Grey Cup week itself. I've never been to BC before. This is my first time ever in BC, first time ever in Vancouver.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
They delivered. Like you go from I said the waterfront there, Toronto can't match that. Like I've been to the Toronto waterfront, Vancouver's just blows it away, right? The way they had everything, like you knew it was Grey Cup week in Vancouver. You knew like the central hub with the convention center, everything set up there, that you couldn't have asked for a better time for kind of Vancouver to show that the CFL is emerging there.
Yeah.
After what it's been through the last few years.
Yeah, no kidding. You're right. I mean, hey, I give Amar Doman credit, the owner of the BC Lions, coming in, because it was before David Braley had passed away. He did a lot for the league. I mean, keeping them afloat, keeping the Lions afloat, and even the Argos for a while as well through some pretty troubled times. But it was a fresh start for BC once Amar Doman bought that team and made it clear that he's committed to the CFL, and it has showed. And I know they're disappointed the Lions didn't get to the big game, but I agree. It's still a great week. The walk from where I was staying at the Sheraton, so you had either the walk down Robson to the stadium, 20 minutes or so, or the walk down Burrard to the convention center, where a lot of the events were going on, a lot of the festivities before the game itself, but another 20-minute walk. Great walking city, even with a little bit of rain, because it's November in Vancouver. It's not the nicest weather. It was like a black cloud was over the city the whole time, but I still enjoyed it. I still thought it was festive. You're right. It's a great. I've been to a few of them before. I was there in 11 and again in 14, and so it'd been 10 years since Vancouver got the game. But I thought they did a great job with it, and that starts at the top too. I thought it was terrific. Vancouver's a great host for Grey Cup.
Talking about ownership, Rod, and you're not here to defend or promote the CFL. So I know what you'll say. It'll be totally honest. And the fact is, and this is not a loaded question, it's almost a softball, and I apologize, but the league has never been in better shape with ownership at this point.
It is. Hey, Frank, we remember the days of, especially the expansion to the United States.
Oh my goodness.
Where it just seemed like if you had a couple of bucks, you could buy a CFL team. It was unstable. The CFL in the 90s had some very unstable years where you really had to worry about its future. And it is an easy question to answer now, but you are right, and it's worthy of pointing it out that I cannot recall the league being at a time when it was in such good shape in terms of the wealth of the deep pockets of the owners. Not that any of them are interested in losing money. That's not how they got wealthy. So but good business people, and still community ownership in Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, but still strong, a strong ownership base to support these teams. And I've followed the league for, going on 60 years, 55 years. And I've never quite seen it like this. Now there's still some things that need to be addressed. I mean, the new commissioner is one of them, and I don't know how that's going to play out, but by and large, though, I mean, I've put it this way, and I know, Frank, you can say the same thing. We've seen the CFL in rougher shape financially than it is right now.
Yeah, and when you talk about deeper pockets, I think what's more important are people who know how to develop success. These are people within the business world of today, not the business world of yesterday. And I think, I'm not asking you to comment on this, but this is just my opinion. The owners are going to have to figure out how to give power to a commissioner and give him the latitude to create long-term wealth, if you will, and abilities to be able to get what the owners want in the long run, which sometimes I find in the CFL, the short run gets in the way of the long-term good, because there's this immediate thing that each franchise, this is the crazy thing about the Canadian Football League. I think it's one of the problems with it. I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean in a logical way, where they all have these different ideas on how to have what success looks like, right? Yeah. So it's hard for a commissioner. I'm not here to apologize for Ambrosi, because that's not my job. But I will say that it's a heck of a negotiation for a commissioner to satisfy all 9 ownerships in one specific way. It's almost impossible, it seems.
Yeah, that's the other side of this. You're right that the league is full of more powerful and wealthy owners. Maybe it's never been this way. Maybe it's never been just in terms of ownership this wealthy. But as said before, they didn't get wealthy and they didn't get powerful by losing money, and they all want to make money. And they all want to see this league and their teams generate more money. And I think that was part of the issue of the commissioner change that we're going to be going through in the Canadian Football League. But yeah, no question. But to get everybody all on the same page, I think that is a big challenge.
They're going to have to figure that.
When Mark Cohan, I think it was in 2007, became commissioner. So the story I heard was he wouldn't accept the job. I mean, he was hunted, and I don't think he would agree to accept the job unless it was unanimous. At the time, it would have been 8 teams. That he wanted all 8 teams on board, or else he didn't want to take the job, even if it had been 7-1, which constitutionally still could have, he still could have been named commissioner, but he wanted to know that everybody wanted him. He wanted to know that they were all on the same page that way. But you're bound to have differences of opinion, especially with people who have been so successful and used to doing things their way.
Oh, we've seen that quite a bit. When you look at, I mean, we've seen with the CFL sometimes the Grey Cup happens and there's oftentimes sometimes there's a bit of a quiet period. It's been anything but that around the league. I mean, you look at what's happened right after, like days after the Grey Cup, right? We got a general manager in Edmonton. Now we got a head coach in Edmonton. We got a bunch of moves, quarterbacks changing spots. When you look at all the changes that have happened, which is the one that's caught your eye the most?
Well, it'd be easy to say Vernon Adams to Calgary. And you can't help but feel good for him from the standpoint that it wasn't going to work out in BC with them committing to Nathan Rourke. I mean, you could see the writing on the wall there, and he's just, if you've met Vernon, if you had a chance to talk to him and as I know you have and watched his career as well, that's someone you can't help but want success for. I mean, and he's had some. It looked like the year didn't turn out the same as it had started by the end for VA. But I mean, I'll be very curious. More storylines here just to see how he fits in with Dave Dickinson and in Calgary and how he can help turn the Stampeders around. But I'm also, I get it. What Davis Alexander and Cody Fajardo, I understand it. But still, it must, given Cody Fajardo's history, when he looks at what happened at the end of the 23 season, the drive at the end and the touchdown and everything else. And I know he's a big ticket financially, and the Alouettes moving forward, they like Davis Alexander, and he showed some, some really good reasons why he should be liked and seen as a future, star quarterback in the Canadian Football League. But I just find that I understand the business of it, but still, Cody Fajardo isn't too far removed from one of the great moments, certainly in the history of the Montreal Alouettes. And now we're asking questions about his future. It's with Alexander, with them committing to Alexander as their number one QB.
Being a CFL reporter, I got to tell you, and going back to the 80s, this is also a time, I'm not even sure if it ever exists or maybe I've just forgotten, but when a quarterback springs free, a few years ago, when a quarterback sprung free, it was 3 teams that wanted that guy. And if they didn't get that guy, they wouldn't have a guy. I really think we have extra quarterbacks right now, Rod, more in a way than we ever have had in the Canadian Football League. And I think that's great for the league.
Well, and going back to one of the reasons, Frank, that bad period of time when so many stars were getting injured, and you had a bunch of inexperienced quarterbacks, but they were getting opportunities. I mean, Davis Alexander, things wouldn't have played out in Montreal had Cody Fajardo stayed healthy and continued to be good at the very least. Then they wouldn't be putting this trust in Davis Alexander. Sometimes it's injuries, it's breaks that way other players are given opportunities, and that's part of it. But you're right. I mean, as I look down the list, teams are. I mean, there's questions in Edmonton, right? I mean, that's one question mark. The Calgary one has been addressed with Vernon Adams. Certainly, no questions in Ottawa or Toronto or in Hamilton. The way Bo Levi Mitchell played, right? So, and then Montreal is set that way. So, Claris is around at least another year. I mean, Grey Cup in Winnipeg next year. He's not retiring. And assuming that Trevor Harris,
there you go.
Assuming Harris re-ups with Saskatchewan. Edmonton is probably just with Trey Ford. I mean, Mark Killam is just in as the new head coach. They finally got things set. So now I'll be very curious to see what Edmonton is going to do at quarterback. Will indeed Trey Ford be re-signed, be staying there, and be established as their number one quarterback, or McLeod Bethel Thompson? I mean, with Ed Hervey in there now, with the new regime in Edmonton, that's probably, as far as quarterbacks are concerned, that's the biggest question mark right now.
And then there's coaches. Yeah, the same thing with coaches, where we're going through a run of young first-time coaches having success and creating a breed of like Mark Killam's a guy that I've known. I've been pulling his name. I've been talking about him all year here on this show, that he's the next Calgary coach. Well, he didn't make it in Calgary, but I really did believe that he was the next coach. We also in the CFL are very fortunate that we have a lot of CFL trained, really good head coaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and there's been some turnover. I mean, I can remember the time when, you know, I
The
just got back
merry-go-round.
what's that? I got back into
The
TSN.
merry-go-round. No.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say when I got back into TSN CFL coverage to host the panel, that was in 2014, where the new kids on the block as head coaches were Rick Campbell, Mike O'Shea, and Chris Jones. And now Mike O'Shea is the elder statesman 10 years in to the job. I was thinking about this too, that in the East Division, if you're looking at tenure with one team, Scott Milanovich was a head coach long before Ryan Dinwiddie. But in terms of with the same team now, Dinwiddie is the one with the most tenure. He's got 4 years in the East, I should say, in the East Division. Yeah. Obviously, it's O'Shea and Dickinson in the West. But I mean, Corey Mason, Saskatchewan now. There'll be a new head coach in BC. So new head coach in Edmonton. And Jason Moss is only 2 years in. Milanovich just 1 year in as a head coach in Hamilton, and Bob Dice just a couple of years and a bit with Ottawa. But you do get that turnover, and the one obviously who's impressed the most. I mean, you can't argue against success is Dinwiddie. I mean, 4 years in, three division titles, 3 times first place, 2 appearances in the Grey Cup. 1 year tied a record at 16-2 when they didn't get to the Grey Cup. But I mean, and he was a quarterbacks coach in Calgary, and before that, briefly in OC in Montreal, and largely a backup quarterback in his brief time as a player in the Canadian Football League. It's a remarkable story what's gone on with Ryan Dinwiddie.
That's the other change. It used to be if you were like, remember there was the argument of, he can't be the head coach. He's a defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. He's got to be an offensive coordinator. We have really drilled down into pulling obviously it started in Winnipeg where special teams coaches can be head coaches. We've mm-hmm. learned that. And now you're getting, like you're talking about Dinwiddie, and then you have Mace and now Killam. These are guys who aren't offensive coordinators, which in the old school football for people like me that have a lot of gray hair, that's how it seemed you went. You had to be an offensive coordinator to be a head coach. It's changed completely.
Yeah, well, you're right. There have been a lot of successful offensive coaches who've gone on to be successful head coaches. But I would throw the name out. Mike O'Shea, special teams coordinator. You're right, from Toronto, but of course, a guy that certainly knows and understands defense from his Hall of Fame playing career.
Absolutely.
Don Matthews and Wally Buono.
Yeah, you're right.
Defense too. So I mean, there are examples. I mean, from both sides of the ball, but you're right. It's interesting. I mean, Dinwiddie, of course, obviously an offensive mastermind, and Dave Dickinson, of course, had been as well as an excellent Hall of Fame quarterback in the Canadian Football League. So, and Jason Moss too. I mean, and you see them. I think budget as much as anything. You'll see a lot of head coaches who are also coordinators right now because of that coaching cap that they had. I think that's a part of it anyway. I think for some, they like to have the control over their area of expertise. But I do think that it's harder in this day and age because of the coach's salary cap to have a head coach and then 2 well-paid coordinators as well.
The CFL has done as a not just as a league, but the CFL family, if I can call it that. One thing they've had to do is to be able to pivot, mm-hmm. and adapt. And the CFL does it because of the game, I think, more than any one individual.
Mm-hmm. In all sorts of ways. So you're talking about off the field and on.
Every way, as much as people like to criticize, well, it's easy to criticize the commissioner. But the one thing I'll say, and you can weigh in as you wish, the best thing I can say about Ambrosie is that he'll be the commissioner that brought in rule changes that really did improve the game. A lot of people, CFL fans especially, we're terrible. We don't like change, mm-hmm. So kicking and screaming, there were a lot of rule changes that were made in the Canadian Football League that the NFL has adopted, showing that there's some approval for those moves. And I think Ambrosie deserves a lot of credit for creating the environment to be able to do that kind of stuff.
I think he'll be remembered for that. I remember when he came in as a former player and actually had been on the Players Association side, so he knows both sides of that negotiation with the players and the league. But I mean, I think there were certainly some successes to his tenure as well, and I think there are those I know who are a lot closer to the situation, the circumstances as to why he's leaving. Because I think the divide was 5 in favor and 4 against, but
That's
you
reports.
know, further from unanimous. But I think that was more the business side of things. It was less about the on-field product. I think it was more because TV ratings, the especially this year too, where I think you could view the league as being tremendously successful for the product. I mean, all my own bias aside, but I do still think that it was an entertaining product to watch. But I sense it's more the business side of things and how much money, franchise value, and how much money they're generating was more the issue for the commissioner.
I'd like to look at it as a better way to sell the game.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's about being able to reach people who may appreciate the game after all. And right now, the change, in my opinion, with the commissioner is because you've had somebody in charge for a certain amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certain things that they're not good at, and now you're going to hire the next guy or gal, hopefully, who can work on those aspects, those lack of successes, and they can hire somebody that may have strengths in that regard. It's the same reason why they went, like you said, when they went and chased a commissioner, they felt a need, and they're going to feel that need now, and hopefully they basically
Mhm.
figure out Rubik's Cube,
Yeah.
which it feels like to me sometimes.
Yeah.
Going to the games and seeing the product and then looking in the stands. David and I cover the Toronto Argonauts, so I don't have to explain to anybody
Well,
that we understand that issue.
yeah, I said my bias is up front. It's there. But I have always felt, and I certainly feel now, like it's a great product to sell. So you're right. I mean, whatever can be done to sell it more and get and also the demographic argument too, to get more kids, more of the younger generation interested in doing it as well. And that's in becoming fans and going to games and things like that is important because it's that the one of the criticisms that I've heard for many years is there's too many people like me who are that's the core of the fan base. So I'm still happy that I am, but you gotta I think they want to target younger, and I certainly understand that.
We need younger people like David with less hair. Is that what you're trying to say? No, I'm just kidding.
David, you gonna take that from him?
I get it all the time. Not
There
even from him. It just bounces off of me now at this point.
Milt, anyone who was it was a little bit thinner would come in the studio, and Milt Stiegel would see them, and he would just say, "When are you going to do it? Take it all right down. Take it on." And bald is beautiful. That's always Milt's attitude on it all, and you never age, right? So
I want to apologize to you. This has been the longest 15 minutes I've ever had. Again,
that's okay. It's been fun.
Okay, good, because I honestly,
it's the Italian 15 minutes, Frank. You didn't tell him that.
You know what with this though, and once you get me wound up, I mean, you're going to have to get the white can out for me and say, sorry, we're running out of time. We got to go. So, but no, once you get, I thank you guys because it's been fun talking about my career and also about the passion we all share, and that's for the Canadian Football League. The time just sailed right by. It felt like 15.
I really wanted people to get to know who you are, and it was a sincere reflection on your career. And we do have a lot of people out there who want to have this as a career, and it's about getting hope, right? Because the whole underlying thing about what you do and what you've done is, if what we're talking about is how hard your work can get you to where you are,
yeah,
everybody has the opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. I truly believe that. I mean, I think there's a shift going on in terms of the old TV radio model is not what it used to be in terms of those opportunities. But as said, look at what the two of you are doing, and look at the way. I mean, there's still, the consumers. We're all out here consuming. We just consume in a different way now, and that means to me anyway. And technology affords the opportunity that. I mean, it would have been a whole lot harder for you guys to do what you do 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just so the technological change hasn't just taken jobs away. I think it's shifted them, and it's opened up other opportunities, and it's up to people who want it badly enough, I think, to realize that and realize where the best fit is and where they can make it. And yeah, I think having that desire is really important. So I would still encourage people that way.
I'll let you have the last word, David.
No, I appreciate this, Rod. I think the CFL just needs people talking about it, and that's what we're here to do.
It's fun. It's fun. I enjoy it. So,
and thank you for taking all this extra time.
Oh, my pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And Rod, keep doing what you do, because we appreciate what you do, and we really do. Also, I can speak for David here and myself. You're a wonderful person. On the personal side, you've always been a very kind and sharing person with me, and I know with David probably as well, but I'll speak only for myself there. And I really thank you for the time you've taken to be here with us. There's a lot of other podcasts you can be on. This isn't the only one. As much as you say things have changed, I'm so grateful that there's so many podcasts out there, and there's so many people that are trying to, bring people to the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's very kind of you, Frank. I appreciate that, and great to spend some time with you. Enjoy it.
David's gonna be out there in the future. He'll be carrying the torch for me anyway, because this has been a lot of fun. I love working with you, David, because of your youth and your excitement and looking forward and having the desire. And I speak to all Canadian Football League fans who love the game. Keep loving it. And it may not feel as though it loves you back, but you know what? We'll go back to that phrase we used earlier. Work at loving it. Trust me, you'll feel rewarded. I love every game, and I'm already missing the Canadian Football League, and it's only been a couple of weeks since the Grey Cup, David.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I know it's been great, and we'll try to keep things going.
Yeah, absolutely. Your demographic, David.
That's right. That's why I keep mentioning you, David.
The present and the future. So
there you go.
Anyway,
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. It's great.
Okay. For Rod Smith and David Morisuti, I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live on Mondays at 4 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it here, read it, download it, live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Pick up a football. You might like it. Until next time.
We made sure.
I think we lulled the producer asleep. I think.
I sent him a note.
You sent him a note. Good. He did know. He Hey, David. So we've got some stuff going on in the Canadian Football League going in the future. We've got free agency coming, so that's going to be the fun part. We had some shoes drop. We didn't talk about the new head coach in Edmonton.
Well, we talked a little bit.
We'll talk about them a little later. I hope our guy hasn't had problems with the internet, because if he's locked off the internet, then he can't turn us off. So that's pretty interesting.
This is the bonus edition.
Yeah. This is the. Is there anything?
The old DVDs, you'd get the movie and then you get the outtakes.
Yeah, this is what we call the outtakes. This is the.
Anyway, well, I'm going to log off myself.
Yes,
go ahead. We'll struggle with this. This is a memorable moment that I'll be able to cherish for the rest of my life.
As viewers, you guys keep it going. So
yeah, and Rod, do me a favor. Check in about an hour if we're still here. Talk to you soon, buddy. I really do appreciate this. Rod Smith, TSN broadcaster extraordinaire, and a great person to boot. And much success in the future. Enjoy your football stuff. A second goodbye. See you soon.
See ya. Bye-bye.